Hello and welcome to Tinted Specs podcast. I'm Georgina and joining me is Tricia Roos, author of When Wishes Change. Thank you so much for joining me, Tricia.
Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting. You're my first guest from Dallas, Texas. We've had a few from the States, but none from Dallas. So that's a good tick for the podcast. So would you like to introduce yourself to everyone that's listening?
Absolutely. I've had 3 children, Cameron, Annabelle, and Andy. And when Cameron was about 3 or 4 years old, he started asking us for a lady baby. And the toddler translation for that was that he wanted a baby sister. And so my husband and I had started discussing having another child, and we decided we were ready. And so a few months later, we were pregnant, and everything was tracking well with the pregnancy. And then around 12 weeks, my doctor mentioned that there was a blood test that we could take to find out the gender of the baby. And I was extremely excited to know if it was a boy or a girl. And so I said yes to that blood test and didn't think much of it. And about 10 days later, I received a call from my doctor. And she seemed a little bit serious on the phone, more so than you would think in that conversation. And so she allowed us to know that the baby was a girl, but that she had been diagnosed with trisomy 18. So this is just kind of a fluke thing that happens at conception. There's nothing you can do to change it. And usually babies with trisomy 18 have severe heart defects and severely disabled. And so just to confirm the diagnosis, we went to a specialist that I was referred to. And after the diagnosis was confirmed, the specialist did recommend an abortion. And that was just really hard to hear. And it was really overwhelming for us all in this very short period of time to be told that we were going to have a baby that would potentially die before we even made it full term. So thought a lot about it and prayed a lot about it and knew we wanted to keep the pregnancy and just give it our best. And the timing of all of this happened about a week and a half before volleyball season started. So here in Texas, volleyball is a really, really big high school sport. It's probably the most popular. And I was the head volleyball coach at a really large high school. And so I decided to go into the season and just tell the girls what was going on and let them know that I had no idea if I would make it through the whole season or not, if she was born early. And they just did an amazing job supporting me and my family. And the beauty of all of that is we actually won the state championship, which is obviously a really big deal. And those girls just gave it their all every day and said it was in honor of our daughter, Annabelle. And so that really helped me through the pregnancy, most of the pregnancy, just having a bunch of community rally around us. So about a month and a half after the state championship, we gave birth to her at Baylor Hospital, which is the largest hospital in downtown Dallas. And she was born alive, which nobody expected to happen. They had told me there would probably be about a 10% chance of meeting her alive. She only had a 2-chamber heart. And so obviously we know we have to have 4 chambers in our heart to breathe and to survive. And once she started breathing, they got her on my chest right away. And from then on, this little tiny baby just was a miracle every single day that she was alive. And we were able to bring her home with us from the hospital, and she died when she was 6 days old. And I think that even though it was a tragic situation, there wasn't this huge miracle of healing. We were just so lucky to get to meet her and to hold her. And after that, I know that so many people that are grieving a loss, it's a lot of shock and denial at first, and then there's a whole array of emotions that follow. And for us, I think with that community support, it was really nice. But then as soon as everybody was going back to their lives, it was really hard to grieve our child. And we ended up pregnant again about 6 or 7 months later. And then now we have that little baby girl. Her name is Andy, and she's now 5. But I feel like I'm at a point now where, it's been 6.5 years, and we just have been through so much as a family. But I know that so many women go through miscarriages and go through infant loss and have trouble having babies. And I think mothers in general, we all have trouble just parenting and getting through each day with our children. And I think I finally got to a point where I felt that I could write. And so I did start writing. which was extremely therapeutic. And then once I got through the book, I decided I wanted it out in the world. And so I really hope that the book can be an inspiration, that you can find hope and joy despite tragedy and loss.
I mean, one of the pictures I was really touched by was the picture of your little boy holding Annabelle. And I just thought it was beautiful because he was looking down at her smiling and she was definitely smiling at him. And I just think that those kind of memories are so precious, aren't they? And it's something that he will have with him for the rest of his life. I suppose the other thing to think about is you have had a period of mourning for like over 6 years. So you've had a chance to kind of go through all the cycles. There's different steps to grief, aren't there? I'm sure you know more about it. And you've gone through that. And I suppose that writing the book was kind of like really also incredibly therapeutic. And have you found people approaching you to say thank you for sharing your book and how helpful it's been to them?
Yeah, I think for some reason, I think a lot of women with miscarriages or any kind of struggles, it can go way beyond that, just struggles. There's a really hard problem with women sometimes to share that and be open with other people. And it's really easy to feel isolated and to feel alone in your grief. So, whatever that grief may be. And I have been extremely inspired through speaking, public speaking, and writing that it's touched people in so many different ways. And so, for example, I was speaking at a college last week, and afterwards, this very sweet girl, college age, said that she found out her mom was diagnosed with cancer, I think pretty far along. And she's really been struggling with her faith. And she wanted to know how she can stay strong in her faith. So even though I was sharing my story about my daughter and losing her and my very vulnerable journey with my faith, that struck her in a different way regarding her mother than what the actual story was about. So I've been able to hear so many amazing women and men and stories and struggles that they're going through that are completely unrelated to what I wrote about. But I wanted to take that title, When Wishes Change, and be more than the fact that the book is a lot about losing a child. And I wanted it to be more about when we dream of something or we wish for something and it doesn't come true or it's completely changed, how do we respond to that change? And what do we do when things don't go our way to make sure that we can keep going and that we can find happiness and joy?
I think the title is incredibly clever, actually, because you're so right. So many things in our lives. I mean, obviously, there's when you lose someone, and a child is even worse. But also, you could have decided that you were going to get married, or you're going to live in a certain way, or get a certain job, and that doesn't happen. And I think life's all about when wishes change, because you might have a wish, and then you have to navigate around it. I mean, the whole pandemic is kind of a bit like that. We've all kind of been through that in a way as well, haven't we? I wanted to talk a bit about your faith. So when you found out the news about Annabelle, did you question your faith quite deeply at that point?
I don't think I questioned my faith, but I definitely questioned why.
Yeah.
So, to me, I want things to make sense. I want things to be just. I want things to be fair. And to me, that didn't make sense and it wasn't fair because, we had this, healthy baby with our first pregnancy. And I guess I could say I just wasn't aware. I never experienced anything happening like that before. My parents had divorced. I had lost friends. I've lost some family members. But this was the most monumental, difficult time I had ever experienced in my life. But I actually think that I pursued my faith more because I needed to know that there was a purpose. I needed to know why this plan was going this way. And I think that the more that I sought out God and the why behind it, I got answers. And there's some interesting stories in the book. For example, my dog growing up was literally like my best friend. I had a cockapoo and she was always with me. And I actually had a dream where she came to me in the dream and spoke to me as if that was normal. I remember being very calm and thinking, yeah, my dog's talking to me. This is normal. And I remember her kind of writing out this list for me. And this was probably when I was 6 or 7 months pregnant, that everything would be okay, that we would be blessed, that Annabelle's life had tremendous purpose. And there was a couple things in the dream specifically about learning more about her heart condition, which we didn't have a lot of information at the time, but we did seek out more information to learn more after that dream. We were about to do a renovation on our house because we had a really small house, and we needed a little bit more extra space if we were going to have 2 children. And so she said, knock it off. Don't do the renovations. You're going to have to focus a lot of time and energy on your pregnancy, on Annabelle. And I just think that was one of the many signs that I got, that continuously that I got, that everything was going to be okay and that God had a plan for her life. And I do feel now that it's been several years and I have gone through all those steps of grieving. When I talk about her, I talk about her life. I would have broken down in tears every time a few years ago. And I did. I had many encounters of crying, just randomly talking about a story about her. But I needed time to elapse and I needed to go through those steps to be in a place to where I could give hope to others and be more of a helper than being helpless.
I think that's so important for people to hear, that it does take time, and that, you are going to be incredibly upset for, a long, long time. And even though you're not crying now, you're still, I mean, I lost my father ages ago, and now I can talk about it and I don't cry, but there was a time where I'd literally just sob,
Yes.
so yeah. Whereas, and it does get a bit easier. You don't miss them any less. You don't feel any less sad, but I think that that's so important for people to know, that it's okay that you're, in pieces, and that
Yes.
it will get better, and things, and it will, there are positives that can come out of it, definitely. So when the doctors told you that you should just have an abortion, I mean, how did that make you feel? And looking back now, you must be very happy you didn't.
Absolutely. I think that all of these things happen so fast. So when I got the call from my doctor about the diagnosis, I was in Portland, Oregon, which is really far away from Dallas, Texas, at a work conference. And so I had to fly back almost through the middle of the night to get home. And then I ended up the next morning in a specialist office. And so from the time I was told she had trisomy 18 to that confirmation, I mean, it was less than 24 hours. My first thought was that something could happen to me. I didn't know anything about the condition. And so I thought maybe it was a possibility that my life was in danger. And so it took me a few days of, I think I'm just by nature a researcher. I want to learn all the things I can about something and then be able to say, okay, I know more now, and this is my plan. This is what I'd like to do. So I researched it. I looked everything up I could. I read every medical journal. I asked my doctor more questions, my OB that I went back to. And the more I realized that my life had no impact, I mean, the only thing that could happen is I would retain an excessive amount of fluid over time if she couldn't swallow amniotic fluid. But that didn't mean I was going to die. It just, and I gained a lot of weight, which I did. But I just needed some time to process all of the emotions and the data and the facts in order to say, okay, I know who I am, I know what I want, and I want to do anything I can to meet this child. And it will not be an option if I have an abortion. And one thing that struck me early on was that my entire life, I mean, I've been a coach. I knew I wanted to coach when I was in high school. I became a coach really young. I love coaching athletes, and I always ask them to give it their all. And you teach kids that it's not about the winning and losing. It's about getting better and feeling like you have done everything you can, so that at the end of the match, you can walk off and say, you know what, I tried my absolute hardest. And even if that means you fall short, it might hurt, but at least you know you gave it everything you could. And for me, as I processed all of this, I felt like I was not giving it all I could if I chose that route. And if I chose to continue with the pregnancy, that I would do everything I could to keep myself healthy and the baby inside of me healthy. And if I got to meet her alive, I would do everything I could to make her comfortable or give her the life, that could be comfortable until she might pass away. But I felt like that was more in line.
Oh, you're back. That's good, because I got the end of that sentence. But I think it's great, this parallel between coaching and how you had a realization that, you tell the girls on your volleyball team, to give it their best shot. I mean, when you explain it like that, it makes complete sense, your decision. And well, it makes complete sense anyway, because you as a family had your daughter for 6 whole days, which is, a short time, but it is a good amount of time to kind of, to bond a bit and to kind of build relationships with for her with other people, so that they could get to know her. And presumably those days were quite busy, because obviously you wanted to get as many people as you could to meet her, and you obviously had to look after her, and you had your little boy as well. So how did that feel at that time?
I think that when we realized that she was alive, I mean, it took almost 4 minutes for them to get her to breathe. They immediately brought her to my chest. It's called kangaroo care, where the baby being on the mother's chest regulates their breathing better. And her heart rate was normal, and she was just calm. I mean, she was calm like her whole life. She was happy. And I remember the moment that my son got to meet her and say hello to her, and his sweet little voice, like talking to her. And we had this, joke over a few days that every time Cameron came in the room, her little head would pick up a little bit when he started talking. Because when I was pregnant, he talked to her in my stomach all the time. I mean, talked and talked and talked and talked. And then when she came out, he talked and talked and talked. And so I really felt like there was a true bond there between the two of them. There's actually a video on YouTube that had, I don't know, 50 or 60,000 views. And the day before she died, we were doing a photo shoot. My sister drug over a photographer. We were exhausted and I felt terrible. But she knew, she had the foresight to know that this would be an opportunity to get some family pictures. And so in the middle of setting up lights and, things like that, Cameron asked to hold her, and, fragile baby, 3.5-year-old, but he had been so good with her. And so of course we had plenty of pillows and everything and let him hold her. And he just started singing at the top of his lungs to her. And my sister just very subtly got out her camera and started taking a video, because it was so genuine. It was not scripted at all. It was just a really sweet moment where he started singing to her and singing about how much he loved her. And my son is 10 and he still holds every one of those memories. He talks about her as if he remembers it yesterday. And I think that the fact that we have kept her in our conversations and in our prayers, that is such a blessing to him that he got to meet her and he loved her so much. And I think that he now has even more appreciation for the other sister that he has that's here on earth. He takes care of her. He watches over her. They fight like every other sibling do, but he really takes care of her and protects her. And I think a lot of that comes from, what happened with Annabelle. And it's just a sweet love that I think siblings have that's different than any other relationship.
Yeah, certainly the photo I saw was just so wonderful. And I bet that helped him with the grieving process, because I'm sure, when she actually did die, that must have just been, I mean, even if it's happening, it's still a huge shock, I think. I think everyone needs to understand, even if someone's going to die, it's still a massive, massive shock. So that must have been very, very difficult. And I guess for him, he had these memories that he had these precious moments with her. That must have helped him a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think over time we definitely realized that all the time that he got holding her and talking to her and singing to her and just seeing her alive, meeting her alive was really special. And you're right. I mean, I remember the moment she died. It was in my arms and it was the most painful experience of my life. And there's nothing that could ever be worse than that. But at the same time, um, one thing that's really amazing about children. So Cameron, when we were pregnant, we prepared him that she was not going to make it at all because we were told there would be less than 10% chance for her to even be born alive. And so when she did die, we just said, buddy, her heart was, not healthy and she had to go to heaven to be healed. And the Bible talks a lot about the faith of a child. And the way that he processed that was very black and white. And he understood that she was not healthy on earth and that she needed to go back to heaven. And now when someone asks him, hey, how many siblings do you have? And it's very black and white. I have one in heaven and I have one on earth. That's always
Oh,
going to be his answer, always.
yeah,
He did it at school when he was that age and he does it now when he's 10.
yeah.
And he really, he's had a lot of sadness and grief. And I think as he's gotten older, I've been able to talk to him about more of the story. There's only so much he could handle at the time when he was 3.5. And then
Mm,
we were able to reveal more as he's gotten older. And he did try reading the book and we decided it wasn't appropriate yet for him because there was so much going on that he did not know about at the time with my doctor's appointment and what was going on that we're not ready for him to hear everything.
mm.
Because even right around my birthday that year, I was featured in the Dallas Morning News, and it was a great story, just kind of about a coach triumphing through a pregnancy with her team. I was going back and forth between my two worlds, and it was a great article. But there were some people that were really, really mean and judgmental on the comments because that's what everybody does, right, on social media.
Mm.
And I don't want him reading about that right now. He's still young and he's still learning about just what has gone on. So I think that the way that he handled her life and the way he saw heaven and eternal life and the way he grieved, I learned more from him than I think I did myself in watching that experience.
Yeah, I bet. And I have to say, I think it's very healthy for him when he's asked, does he have a sibling? And he says, I've got one in heaven and one in, in earth. I think that's really, because when he gets older, he can just repeat that again and again. Because I think that if you have lost a sibling or a parent, when people ask you, it hurts more. But if you say they're in heaven, it doesn't sound so bad, does it? It's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a nice way of saying it. I wanted to talk a bit about the volleyball team and that kind of relationship, because obviously because you were obviously very busy and then had lots of matches and then you were having to go for appointments and, you were becoming more and more pregnant. So how important was it for you to have that going on at the same time, just to keep your mind, I suppose, to have some time off from thinking about, the difficult things that were happening?
Yeah, it was more like a mental break. And I think for all of us, I mean, whatever it is that you're going through right now, that could be a difficult situation. You need some kind of outlet. And a lot of people choose to work out or they go to happy hour with their friends or, I mean, whatever it is that is something that makes you happy. And to me, I would go to a doctor's appointment. Nothing was improving. It was always negative. I mean, it was always like, yes, she has a 2-chamber heart. She's very small. I mean, as the pregnancy went further and further along, you could tell that this was not a good situation. But then at the end of the day, I could go to the volleyball court and I could be in a whole different world and run practice. And one thing that is, it's a stereotype for teenagers is that they're so self-consumed. And there's some truth to that. If you remember being a teenager, like it was the end of the world if you and your best friend got in a fight, or if, a boy did something, whatever. But I think that these young athletes were so beyond their years to just see that I was going through something that was really difficult situation. And there was just this promise that when we got in the gym, that it was going to be fun. There would be no complaining. We're not going to talk about, the drama of the day, the hard English test, or a best friend fight. It was just going to be really fun. And so what I think came out of that was they bonded as a team closer because they really respected each other. They made it a safe space. They made it a fun space. And that's probably one of the only years in my coaching career that I could honestly say, like, there was no drama. It was fun. It was enjoyable. There were no setbacks. We just kept moving forward as a team, and we kept winning and winning and winning. And I had a lot of talent on that team, but I don't know that we would have won as much as we did if we didn't have that really close bond together and just playing for something bigger. I mean, they had told me early on that this was for Annabelle and that they were, playing their matches and they wanted to win state for her, which was extremely humbling, right? But I think that because they were selfless in their endeavors, it helped them to be a better team as a whole.
Yeah, and I'm sure it helped them in themselves as well, because it showed them that if you put positivity in and just cut out everything else, and you get so much more out of something. I think it's really hard for young people because of the internet, to be honest. I didn't grow up with it, and they have so many other distractions, let alone boys or fights, or they've got the whole internet as well. So for them to just be sports, to play the game and be so focused on making sure it is positive for everyone, but especially you, and for doing it for Annabelle, must have been fantastic. So the book's been out a month now, and your life's changed quite dramatically since over the last couple of months, hasn't it?
Oh my gosh, so much. So I wrote the book all over basically 2020. And then, I got into the editing process and realized that was way more for me to do because, I'd lived in the book. And so I found an amazing editor through a friend. And so in the spring, we started meeting weekly. I mean, I had to take off work to meet with her. And there was just some things at work that were not going so well and I didn't agree with. But then the book was going so well, and I found tremendous purpose every time I met with my editor and I was writing, and I really was getting empowered to say, hey, I really think I have a story to share. I think that because we've gone through this whole pandemic, this is a time when people need hope and inspiration. And so I ended up leaving my job and pursuing public speaking. I'm traveling. It's kind of a random thing, but it's high schools, it's colleges and churches and conferences. It's a little mix of everything. And I'm willing to go anywhere. So I'll come to the UK and hang out with you any day. But I started just seeing a different purpose for my life. And ironically, as I am creating a book that I titled When Wishes Change, my entire life was changing before my
Yeah.
eyes in a whole new way, a new career path. And it was hard. I resisted it. I struggled with it, but I was really unhappy in my job. I was, and I loved every kid I worked with. And actually my team was great. But I was finding that as I was taking off these days of the week to write the book, that I had something different in front of me. So now I'm several months in, and I'm doing all these things. I'm also consulting. So my entire passion in my career field was admissions and marketing, and especially in private schools, it's just hard. A lot of schools have people wearing multiple hats, and they're having to do everything and not focus in on one thing. So it's actually much more affordable to talk to a consultant and get some advice and some help with that. I'm also consulting and helping a volleyball club here in town that I'm getting to coach coaches. And then I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements and selling the book. So, we're a 2-income household, and we choose to send our kids to a private Catholic school here in town because we love everything that they stand for. And it's just really worked out well. So I enjoy what I'm doing. I've also picked up tennis. I realized that being at home all day is really hard for me, to kind of lose some of the social interaction I had. And I loved playing when I was in high school. And a lot of mornings I get to go out and socialize and play and get a check multiple boxes.
I think that it's just so, it's slightly mind blowing. I got a bit of a tingle when you said that you wrote a book called When Wishes Change, and basically your wishes just changed without you even realizing. It sounds like it took you a while to catch up with what had actually happened, really, through the whole process of grieving and starting to write the book and the whole editing process. Sounds like that's when it really happened. And you realized you had this amazing, not amazing is the wrong word, I don't want to say amazing, but this very interesting and important story to tell, which was based on, Annabelle. So during the pandemic, were you going to school every day, or were you at home during that time?
So we ended up, school got canceled. You remember when like the world shut down? That was in March. And I mean, we had an Italy trip planned a month later for our anniversary and with some friends. And I remember having a conversation, oh, it'll be fine in a month, right? Well, no, we never went back to school for the kids. So they were home that whole spring and then into the fall. And I mean, they finally went back, but I was home a lot. I mean, it was a lot of work from home, which we had never done over here. I mean, in the US, you work as hard as you can and as much as you can. And that's what I was the master at. I was at my desk every morning at 7:30, regardless if I coached a volleyball match and got home at 11 o'clock at night, it didn't matter. And in admissions, people are going to contact you in the evenings because that's when they're home from work. And you answer. I mean, well, I answered. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I did all the time. It was my life. And it was such a different pace to be home. And at first, I remember crying a lot because I was trying to work and manage my children's education at the same time. And that was really difficult. And we were all trapped here in the house for a really long time. But I do think in hindsight, the way that the world changed ended up being a blessing for me because I learned how to work remote and I learned a lot of new technology, and I was forced into that situation. And now that's the technology we're using more frequently. And it did give me more time to write. And writing was an amazing process because my brain, I think because it was so difficult, blocked out a lot of memories. And when I was at home and I had more time to think and I was conscientiously trying to bring back those memories, I went through some really painful times in the last 2 years through writing because I would have a memory that came back that I couldn't have told you 6 months earlier. And it just came back maybe in the middle of the night, or as I was writing, I would just remember something that was really a difficult thing. But once I wrote it down and was able to process that memory, it became really like therapy for me. And sometimes, like you said, you lost your dad a long time ago. I don't know if this is societal pressure or just the pressure I put on myself, but both my husband and I went through some kind of traumatic grieving about 2 years ago. And I remember thinking I was really self-conscious because I thought, well, people are going to say, you lost your daughter 5 years ago. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you over it now? And I kept a lot of it internal, and there was very few people I told about it. I mean, my boss at the time was a good friend, and he knew a lot of my panic attacks and other things I was experiencing. But I thought I had to be strong and prevent the whole world from knowing a lot of those things because so much time had elapsed. And so I would say that, to keep in mind that people that are going through grief, so like say you lost your job however many months ago, or you left your job, I'm still grieving the loss of leaving the place I worked for 16 years, and it's been several months. And I'm really happy and grateful for what I'm doing, but it doesn't mean that it's still not going to take time for me to experience like the fullness of that grief and loss.
Yeah. And actually, my dad died over 20 years ago now. So, but I have to be honest, I think a lot of my actions in those years, a lot of it what stemmed from grief. And it took me a long while to process it. I mean, it really did take a long, long time to process. So I might not have been sobbing, but yes, it does take a long time. And I think that society is becoming more aware of that now as well, because people are talking about it like yourself and writing books, and they're becoming more, you know, more widely read by a bigger community. And I think it's so important for people to share their experiences, because it helps everyone so much. I mean, one of the things I'm learning so much from doing the podcast is I'm learning from every single person I'm speaking to, and it's making me suddenly I'll go, oh, tick, you know, something. Every time I speak to someone, it's just like, oh yeah, that's why. Or you know, and it's just, thank you so much, Tricia. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you. And I gather there's a new book coming out. Well, you're writing it right now, so it might be not immediately, but what's that about before we go?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about coaching, and I don't know what it's like over there, but here youth sports is insane. I mean, I was at tennis today and saw, I think, a 2-year-old like starting a tennis lesson, and it was really cute. But I was like, wow, that's really young. And now that I have small children and I'm watching them through sports, I'm seeing a lot of pros and cons about how parents of athletes respond to different situations and the pressure that I think we're putting on our children to win and to be competitive athletes at such a young age. And then on the other end, you know, I coached 20 years high school athletes, and I watched some of that burnout, and I watched some of that pressure that they were receiving from parents or outsiders. And so I've just started putting it in writing and putting it together. But I do think that is another one of those topics that we're going to have to talk about our kids and how we appropriately teach them to compete and work their hardest. And I love winning so much. I really do. But even now, as I'm playing tennis, I'm like, if I put it all out there and I work my hardest, I'm so happy. Like, I'm going to be able to leave the court and be okay with that. And even some adult women are not okay with that. I mean, it's just, we put so much pressure on sports, and our identity is found in winning. And you're not worth anything if you're not winning. I mean, we saw Simone Biles go through this through the Olympics, and we've seen so much pressure on these poor young kids that it's just affecting their mentality and just the way that they can live the rest of their lives. So it's just a beginner project. If I think of something, I record myself on my phone, or I'll open up the document and start typing. But that's kind of how this book began. And then once I decided I had enough content, I really dove into it deeper. So we'll see. But I do enjoy writing. I think it's just a great thing to do, to get out your thoughts and have therapy as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that area is really important, because in every, like, we had the Olympics, like you said, and the athlete you're talking about, for people listening, isn't she a gymnast?
Mm-hmm.
And she pulled out of the whole thing in the end. I remember it was very upsetting. And obviously, tennis wise, we've got in the UK Emma Raducanu, and she had problems at Wimbledon. She couldn't complete her match, and then she came into the States and played in New York and did really well. But again, I think that shows kind of the pressure that's put on these athletes, and emotionally and physically, and you clearly have a huge amount of experience. So I think the book will be a really interesting read for people, because you'll be able to show them kind of how far to push and what kind of messages to give the kids to kind of get through. But anyway, happy tennis playing. Well, as soon as you said that, I was like, Emma Raducanu. And Tricia, thank you so much for speaking to me, and have a great weekend over there, and hopefully see you in the UK at some point.
I'd love to be there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.